Lisa Kane floated in the training room, watching the other cadets prepare for the morning exercise. The massive chamber stretched out like a metal cave, filled with twisted beams and floating debris that would test their skills today. She checked her suit one more time, making sure every seal was tight. 3 years at the Galactic Defense Academy, and she still felt like an outsider. The other species looked at humans like they were wild animals who had somehow learned to use tools. Today would be no different. "Attention, cadets," Commander Nexus announced through the speakers. His voice carried the cold precision that all Nixari used when speaking to lower species. "Today's exercise simulates a damaged space station. Your mission is to rescue civilian targets while the structure collapses around you. You will work in pairs." Lisa watched as the pairings appeared on the wall display. Her heart sank when she saw her assignment. Kestra Vane, the Zephyrian noble, whose family had been flying between stars since before humans discovered fire. The crystal formations on Kestra's wings caught the light as she moved, making her look like a living jewel. Beautiful, deadly, and completely convinced that humans were barely worth her notice, Jake Morrison drifted over to Lisa's position. His dark hair floated around his head in the zero gravity, and his brown eyes showed the same worry she felt. "Got paired with Commander Ice Queen again?" "Her name is Kestra," Lisa said quietly, though she understood Jake's frustration. The Zephyrian had made it clear from day one that working with humans was beneath her station. "Right, and I got stuck with Valorian the Terrible." Jake nodded toward his partner, a massive warrior whose red skin marked him as one of the finest fighters in the galaxy. "Think he's planning to let me do all the work while he takes the credit?" Before Lisa could answer, the exercise began. The lights dimmed, emergency sirens wailed, and the training room transformed into chaos. Artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, sending debris spinning in every direction. Holographic fires erupted along the walls, and the computer began counting. Down their time limit. Lisa kicked off from the wall and soared toward the first rescue target. The holographic civilian flickered in and out of sight, trapped beneath a fallen beam in the station's lower section. She could hear Kestra following. Behind her, the Zephyrian's wing movements creating soft whistling sounds in the artificial atmosphere. "Human," Kestra's voice came through the comm system, cold and formal. "I will handle the civilian extraction. You clear the debris path." Lisa bit back her first response. 3 years of this treatment had taught her to pick her battles carefully. Understood, moving to clear the route. She grabbed a piece of floating metal and used it to push larger debris out of their path. The work was hard and dangerous, with sharp edges that could tear her suit if she wasn't careful. Behind her, Kestra moved with the grace that all Zephyrians possessed, her crystal wings adjusting their angle to navigate through tight spaces. They rescued the first civilian quickly, working together despite the tension between them. The second target was harder to reach, trapped in a section where the artificial gravity kept shifting between normal and zero. Lisa found herself spinning helplessly when the gravity changed, while Kestra adapted easily with her natural flight abilities. "Stay close to the wall," Kestra said, and for the first time her voice carried something other than cold command. "The gravity field is more stable near the structure." Lisa followed the advice and found that Kestra was right. They moved faster after that, working through the rescue scenario with growing efficiency. Maybe this partnership might actually work. Then the accident happened. They were moving toward the third civilian when the training computer malfunctioned. The gravity field, which should have shifted gradually, suddenly reversed completely. Lisa managed to grab a support beam, but Kestra was caught in the middle of a wing stroke. The sudden change sent her tumbling helplessly toward a mass of twisted metal debris. The other cadets stopped their own exercises to watch. Through the comm channels, Lisa could hear their voices clearly. "Look at the pretty bird fall," laughed Thorak, the Valorian warrior. So much for Zephyrian superiority, added Zix, one of the Nexari intellectuals. Maybe she should have stayed home and practiced flying, came another voice. Even other Zephyrians joined in the mockery. Kestra always was too proud, said one. Perhaps this will teach her humility. The laughter and cruel comments filled the cum channels while Kestra spun helplessly through the debris field. Her crystal wings, so beautiful in normal flight, now worked against her as they caught on floating obstacles and sent her tumbling faster toward the dangerous metal wreckage. Lisa watched in horror as her partner twisted through the air, unable to control her movement. In seconds, Kestra would hit the debris field hard enough to end the exercise in simulated death. The other cadets just watched and laughed, treating her fall like entertainment. But Jake Morrison didn't laugh. Without hesitation, he abandoned his own exercise and launched himself across the training chamber. His Valorian partner shouted at him to return, but Jake ignored the command completely. "Jake, what are you doing?" Lisa called out. "What humans?" "Do," he replied, his voice calm despite the danger. Jake used the floating debris like stepping stones, pushing off from one piece to build speed toward the next. It looked insanely dangerous to the other species, who preferred careful, calculated movements. But Jake had grown up in Earth's gravity wells and asteroid fields, where quick thinking and controlled risks were part of daily life. He ricocheted off a spinning beam, used his momentum to leap from a floating panel, and twisted through a gap that seemed too small for a human body. Every movement built more speed, bringing him closer to Kestra's spinning form. The other cadets stopped laughing. They watched in amazement as the human cadet performed maneuvers that their own flight instructors would have called impossible. Jake's path through the debris field was like a three-dimensional puzzle solved at high speed. Kestra saw him coming and tried to control her spin, but the artificial gravity kept shifting around her. Her crystal wings caught the light as she tumbled, beautiful but useless in the chaotic environment. Jake reached her just before impact. His hand closed around her wrist with a grip that was gentle but unbreakable. Their combined momentum carried them toward the debris, but Jake twisted his body to take the impact on his shoulder while swinging Kestra to safety. They caught a dangling cable together and swung clear of the danger zone. For a moment they hung, there in the artificial gravity, both breathing hard from the rescue. "Why?" Kestra asked, her voice barely a whisper through the cum channel. Jake looked at her with those steady, brown eyes that had surprised so many instructors. "Because you needed help. But I am Zephyrian. You are human. We are not allies." "We are now," Jake said simply. Around them, the training chamber had gone completely quiet. The other cadets floated in stunned silence, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. A human had risked his own exercise score, his own safety, and his own standing to save someone who had shown him nothing but contempt. Lisa felt something change in that moment of silence. The mockery had stopped. The cruel laughter had died away. Instead, there was something new in the air, something that felt like respect. Commander Nexus's voice came through the speakers, breaking the silence. Exercise concluded. All cadets report for debriefing. As they made their way to the exit, Lisa noticed that the other species were looking at the humans differently now, not with the usual mixture of disgust and dismissal, but with something that might have been curiosity. Kestra floated beside Jake as they left the training chamber. Her crystal wings still caught the light, but now she moved with less arrogance and more thoughtfulness. "I do not understand your species," she said quietly. Jake smiled. "That's okay. We're still figuring ourselves out too." Lisa watched them, talking, and felt hope for the first time since arriving at the academy. Maybe being human wasn't something to apologize for after all. Maybe it was something the galaxy needed to learn about. The academy dining hall buzzed with quiet conversations as cadets from different species gathered for their evening meal. Lisa Kane sat at the human table, pushing her protein paste around her plate while watching the social dynamics play out. Across the massive room, 3 days had passed since Jake's rescue of Kestra in the training chamber. 3 days since everything changed. The Zephyrians sat together at their usual crystal table, their wings creating patterns of light as they moved. But something was different. Kestra kept glancing toward the human section, her silver eyes thoughtful, rather than dismissive. "She's been doing that all week," Jake observed, following Lisa's gaze. "Staring at us like we're some kind of puzzle she needs to solve. Can you blame her?" Lisa replied, taking a sip of the bitter academy coffee. "You pretty much shattered her entire worldview in about 30 seconds. At the Valorian table, the red-skinned warriors were having an animated discussion. Lisa caught fragments of their conversation, something about human combat techniques and whether they were brilliant or insane. The debate seemed evenly split. Morrison, a familiar voice said behind them. Jake turned to see Kestra approaching their table. Her crystal wings were folded tightly against her back, a sign of nervousness among her people. The entire dining hall seemed to hold its breath as the Zephyrian nobles stopped beside their table. "Yes," Jake said, his voice carefully neutral. "I wish to speak with you, privately." Kestra's words were formal, but Lisa detected something underneath. The proper tone. Uncertainty, maybe even vulnerability. Jake exchanged a quick look with Lisa, then stood. "Sure, there's a quiet spot near the observation deck." As they walked away together, Lisa felt the weight of hundreds of eyes following them. This was unprecedented. Zephyrian nobles didn't seek private conversations with humans. They barely acknowledged human existence. 20 minutes later, Jake returned alone, wearing a thoughtful expression that Lisa had learned to recognize over their years of friendship. "Well?" she asked. "She wants to train with us tomorrow morning. Combat scenarios." Jake sat down heavily. "Says her current training methods aren't preparing her for real situations." Lisa nearly choked on her coffee. "She wants to train with humans? Her family will disown her." "That's what I told her." She said some risks are worth taking. The next morning, Lisa arrived at Training Room 7 to find Kestra already there, wearing standard Academy combat gear instead of her usual ornate Zephyrian armor. The crystal formations on her wings had been covered with protective padding, making her look less like a noble and more like a soldier. "You're early," Lisa said. "I wanted time to think before the others arrived." Kestra's voice was quieter than usual, lacking its typical commanding tone. "I have been thinking much since the accident." Jake entered with 2 other human cadets, Danny Chun and Maria Santos. They stopped short when they saw Kestra, clearly surprised by her presence. "Everyone ready?" Jake asked, recovering quickly. "Today we're running urban combat scenarios. Close quarters, limited visibility, multiple objectives." The holographic training environment materialized around them, transforming the room into a war-torn city street. Smoke filled the air, debris blocked most pathways, and the sound of distant explosions echoed through the virtual space. "Standard. Zephyrian doctrine?" Kestra began, then stopped herself. "What would humans do in this situation?" Lisa smiled. "We'd probably do something crazy that works better than it should." Jake, want to show her the Morrison special? What followed was unlike anything in standard Academy training. The humans moved through the urban environment like they were playing a deadly game, taking risks that made Kestra's wings twitch with anxiety. But somehow it worked. Instead of the careful, methodical approach taught in Academy classes, Jake led them through a series of rapid, unpredictable movements. They used debris as cover, created distractions with thrown objects, and coordinated their attacks through hand signals rather than channels that enemies could intercept. "This is madness," Kestra said after watching Danny leap from a second-story window to tackle a holographic enemy. He could have been killed. Could have been, Maria agreed. But he wasn't. And now we control that building instead of spending 20 minutes planning a careful assault. The exercise continued with the humans demonstrating tactics that seemed to violate every principle of safe military doctrine. They took calculated risks, accepted minor injuries to achieve major objectives, and adapted their strategy constantly based on changing conditions. But what impressed Kestra most was how they never left anyone behind. When Maria's virtual wound slowed her down, the entire team adjusted their pace to stay with her. When Danny ran low on ammunition, Jake immediately shared his supplies without being asked. Your people fight like a family, Kestra observed during a break in the action. We are a family, Lisa replied. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. Every human who makes it to space knows that we only survive by taking care of each other. But this makes you vulnerable. If you must always rescue the fallen, your enemies can use this against you. Jake leaned against a wall, wiping sweat from his forehead. Maybe, but they can also never predict what we'll do to save each other. Makes us dangerous in ways they don't expect. Over the following weeks, Kestra continued training with the humans. At first, she tried to adapt their tactics to Zephyrian methods, applying careful analysis and systematic approaches to human-style combat. It didn't work. You're thinking too much, Lisa told her after a particularly frustrating exercise. Human tactics work because we trust our instincts and each other. You can't calculate your way to controlled chaos. But how do you know when to take risks? Kestra asked. How do you decide which chances are worth taking? Experience, Jake said. An understanding that sometimes the safe choice isn't actually safe at all. He pulled up a holographic display showing human military history. Images of ancient battles flashed past, showing humans in situations where conventional tactics had failed. My great-grandfather fought in the colony wars, Jake explained. Told me stories about being trapped on Kepler-7 with a broken supply line and enemy forces closing in. Command wanted them to hold position and wait for reinforcement. Standard military doctrine. What did they do instead? Kestra asked. They attacked. Full assault on an enemy position twice their size, using tactics that should have gotten them all killed. But it worked because the enemy was expecting them to follow doctrine. Sometimes being unpredictable is your greatest weapon. The breakthrough came during a rescue simulation. The scenario involved civilians trapped in a collapsed building while enemy forces approached. Standard procedure called for securing the perimeter first, then beginning careful extraction operations. Kestra watched the human team ignore procedure completely. They split up, with some members engaging the enemy, while others immediately began rescue operations. It was chaotic, dangerous, and violated every rule of tactical safety. It also saved twice as many civilians in half the time. I understand now, Kestra said quietly as they watched the simulation results. You do not fight to minimize your own losses. You fight to minimize everyone's losses. Even enemy losses when possible, Danny added. Dead enemies can't surrender, can't provide intelligence, can't go home to their families. This philosophy would be considered weakness by most species, Kestra observed. Most species don't win as often as humans do, Maria pointed out. That evening, Kestra sat with the humans in the dining hall for the first time. The reaction from other tables was immediate and dramatic. Zephyrian cadets stared in shock, Valorian. Warriors muttered among themselves, and even the usually composed Nexari seemed surprised. Your family will hear about this, Lisa warned. I know, Kestra replied, cutting her food with deliberate precision. I have decided that some things are more important than family approval, such as... Kestra looked around the table at the humans who had accepted her without question. who had shared their secrets and methods without asking for anything in return, such as learning from people who reach out their hands instead of pointing fingers. She said, "I spent my life believing that humans were inferior because you act on emotion rather than logic. I was wrong. We're not always logical," Jake admitted, "but we're loyal, and sometimes loyalty matters more than being right." Over the following days, word of Kestra's choice spread throughout the academy. Some cadets from other species began approaching the human training sessions, curious about methods that seemed to produce impossible results. Lisa found herself explaining human tactical philosophy to a mixed group of species for the first time in her academy career. It felt strange but hopeful. The key to understanding human combat doctrine, she told them, is understanding that we don't see acceptable losses. We see people who deserve to go home. A Nexari cadet raised his hand. But this emotional attachment must compromise tactical efficiency. Does it? Lisa asked. Our graduation scores suggest otherwise. The questions continued, and Lisa realized something important was happening. For the first time since humans had been admitted to the academy, other species were asking to learn from them instead of dismissing them. It had started with one Zephyrian noble falling through artificial gravity. Now it was becoming something much larger. The alarm bells rang through the academy at dawn, pulling cadets from their sleep with harsh, urgent sounds. Lisa Kane rolled out of her bunk and grabbed her uniform, her training taking over before her mind was fully awake. Emergency drills were common, but something felt different about this one. In the hallway, cadets from all species moved quickly toward the main assembly hall. Jake Morrison appeared beside her, his hair still messy from sleep, but his eyes alert. "This isn't a drill," he said quietly. "Look at the instructors." Lisa followed his gaze and saw what he meant. The academy staff moved with the sharp efficiency of people dealing with a real crisis. Commander Nexus rushed past them without his usual lecture about proper hallway behavior. Even the maintenance robots seemed to move faster than normal. The assembly hall filled quickly. Hundreds of cadets from 12 different species found their assigned sections while holographic displays activated around the room's walls. Lisa noticed that Kestra had chosen to sit with the human section instead of her usual place with the other Zephyrians. The choice earned her cold stares from her former classmates. Admiral Helena Cross walked onto the central platform, her uniform bearing decorations from conflicts most cadets had only read about. Her gray hair was pulled back severely, and her face showed the kind of serious expression that made even veteran officers pay attention. "Cadets," she began, her voice carrying easily through the huge hall. "What I am about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. 3 days ago, long-range sensors detected movement in the void reaches." A murmur went through the crowd. The void reaches were the empty space between galactic arms, where nothing was supposed to exist except ancient debris and dead stars. "The movement was not natural," Admiral Cross continued. "Our reconnaissance drones found the source. Ancient, automated defense systems, dormant for thousands of years, had begun to activate." The wall displays lit up with images that made Lisa's blood run cold. Massive machines moved through space in perfect formations, their designs unlike anything built by any known species. They looked organic and mechanical at the same time, with surfaces that seemed to shift and change as she watched. "We call them Devourers," the Admiral said. "Archaeological records suggest they were built by a civilization that destroyed itself 10,000 years ago. The machines were programmed to defend their creator's territory. With their creators gone, they have been waiting." "Waiting for what?" called out a Valorian cadet. "For someone to enter their territory, which happened when we sent the reconnaissance drones." Admiral Cross's expression grew darker. "The machines have interpreted our presence as an invasion. They are now moving toward inhabited space." The hall erupted in nervous conversations As cadets tried to process this information, Lisa felt her stomach tighten with worry. Ancient war machines that had been sleeping for millennia were now heading toward populated worlds. "How many ships?" asked a Nixari student, always focused on the numbers. "Our best estimates suggest over 3,000 individual units, ranging from fighter-sized scouts to vessels larger than our biggest battleships. They move in perfect coordination, suggesting some form of hive mind intelligence. 3,000 ancient war machines." Lisa did quick math in her head and didn't like the result. The entire galactic fleet had maybe half that number of ships, and they were scattered across dozens of star systems. "What about our military response?" Kestra asked, speaking up from the human section. Her question drew surprised looks from other Zephyrians. "The Galactic Council is debating options," Admiral Cross replied, but her tone suggested she wasn't happy about that fact. "Full fleet mobilization will take weeks to organize. By then, the Devourers will have reached the outer colonies." "So what do we do?" Jake asked. Admiral Cross looked directly at him when she answered. "We test new approaches. The annual war games have been modified. Instead of routine exercises, you will be facing simulated Devour technology recovered from archaeological sites. The wall displays changed to show technical readouts of Devourer weapons and defenses. The data made no sense according to conventional science. Energy weapons that phased through normal matter, shields that adapted to incoming attacks, and coordination systems that learned from every encounter. Traditional tactics have proven ineffective against these systems," the Admiral continued. "Our test scenarios have resulted in complete failure for every fleet formation we've tried. The machines adapt too quickly to standard approaches." Lisa studied the technical data and felt a chill of recognition. The Devourer adaptive systems worked exactly like the training computers that had given them so much trouble during regular exercises. They learned patterns and countered them within minutes. "Your mission," Admiral Cross said, "is to find approaches that work. The galaxy may depend on what you discover here." The war games began immediately. Mixed teams of cadets faced holographic Devourer fleets in scenarios designed to test every aspect of conventional military doctrine. The results were devastating. Lisa watched team after team suffer complete defeats as the simulated enemies adapted to their tactics. The Valorian approach of direct assault was countered within seconds. Nexari mathematical precision became predictable and easily defeated. Even Zephyrian aerial superiority meant nothing against enemies that could predict flight patterns. "We need different thinking," Kestra said as they watched another team fail spectacularly. "Everything we have learned in academy classes is useless against these machines." "Not everything," Jake replied thoughtfully. "And machines adapt to patterns. But what if there are no patterns to adapt to?" Their turn came that afternoon. Lisa found herself in command of a mixed team, including Jake, Kestra, Banny Chun, Maria, Santos, and 3 cadets from other species who had been training with the humans. The simulation put them in command of a small fleet facing a Devourer squadron. "Standard formation approach?" asked Vex, the Nexari cadet. "No," Lisa said firmly. "We try something new. All ships break formation and attack independently. Change your approach vector every 30 seconds. Randomize your weapon frequencies." "That's chaos," protested Kor, the Valorian warrior. "We'll have no coordination." "Exactly," Jake said, understanding Lisa's plan. "Chaos is something they can't adapt to because there's nothing consistent to learn." What followed looked like complete disaster to any military observer. Ships attacked from random directions, weapons fired in constantly changing patterns, and coordination seemed to exist only in the minds of the human cadets. It violated every principle of fleet tactics. But it worked. The simulated Devourer ships, programmed to adapt to consistent tactical patterns, began making errors when faced with truly unpredictable attacks. Their adaptive systems couldn't counter strategies that changed faster than they could analyze them. Impossible, breathed Commander Nexus as he watched the results. They're winning through pure randomness. Not randomness, Admiral Cross corrected. Controlled improvisation. There's a difference. The humans had discovered something important. The Devourer machines were incredibly advanced, but they had a weakness. They expected their enemies to follow logical, consistent patterns. When faced with opponents who deliberately chose unpredictable approaches, their advantage disappeared. Over the following days, more teams tried to copy the human approach. Most failed because they couldn't truly abandon their structured thinking. The Valorians tried to systematize chaos, which defeated the purpose. The Nexari attempted to calculate optimal randomness, which wasn't random at all. But some cadets from various species began to understand. They started training with the humans, learning to trust instinct over analysis, to value adaptability over consistency. Kestra proved surprisingly good at chaotic tactics. Her Zephyrian grace, combined with human unpredictability, created a fighting style that even the other humans found impressive. "You're getting scary good at this," Jake told her after a particularly successful exercise. "I am learning to think like a human," she replied. "It is more difficult than I expected, but also more effective." The breakthrough came when Admiral Cross revealed the true scope of the crisis. She called the successful cadets to a private briefing room, where classified displays showed the real situation. "The Devourer fleet has accelerated," she announced. "They will reach the outer colonies in 72 hours, not the weeks we originally estimated. The Galactic Council is still debating response options." Lisa felt her heart sink. 72 hours wasn't enough time for proper fleet mobilization. Millions of civilians would be defenseless when the ancient war machines arrived. "However," the Admiral continued, "we have an opportunity. The Academy fleet includes several training vessels that could reach the Devourer Advance Force before they enter populated space. It wouldn't be a full military response, but it might buy time for evacuation efforts." "Training vessels against 3,000 war machines?" Danny asked. "That's suicide." "Yes," Admiral Cross agreed. "Which is why I'm asking for volunteers, not ordering a mission. Anyone who chooses to participate will receive full military commission and hazard pay. Anyone who chooses not to participate will face no consequences." The room fell silent as cadets considered the choice. Fight impossible odds with inadequate ships, or watch helplessly as colonies fell to ancient enemies. The Constitution hung in space like a metal whale surrounded by minnows. The old training cruiser had never been designed for real combat, but Admiral Cross had managed to fit it with the best weapons the Academy could spare. Around it, smaller. Ships waited in loose formation, their crews made up entirely of cadets who had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. Lisa Kane stood on the bridge, wearing the uniform of a lieutenant commander. The promotion felt strange and heavy on her shoulders. 3 days ago she had been a student. Now she commanded the tactical operations for humanity's first real test in galactic warfare. "Final systems check complete," reported Danny Chun from the weapons station. His voice was steady, but Lisa could see the tension in the way he gripped his controls. "All ships report ready for hyperspace jump." Through the main view screen, Lisa watched the Academy growing smaller as they moved away from the station. Part of her wondered if any of them would ever see it again. The Devourer fleet outnumbered them by impossible odds, with technology that made their ships look like toys. "Incoming message from Admiral Cross," announced Maria Santos from the communications station. The Admiral's face appeared on screen, her expression showing the weight of sending children into battle. "Constitution, you are cleared for departure. Intelligence reports suggest the Devourer Advance Force consists of approximately 200 vessels. They will reach the Kepler Nebula in 18 hours. 200 ships, Lisa tried not to think about the odds. Their makeshift fleet had 12 vessels total, most of them barely armed scouts and training fighters. "Understood, Admiral," Lisa replied. "We'll do our best to buy time for the evacuation fleets." "I know you will, Commander Kane. And remember what you learned in the war games. The enemy adapts to patterns, but they can't adapt to genuine chaos. Use that." The connection ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Lisa looked around at her crew, seeing familiar faces wearing expressions too serious for their ages. Jake Morrison sat at the pilot station, his hands moving over controls with practiced ease. Kestra operated the sensor array, her crystal wings tucked tightly against her back in concentration. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump," Lisa announced over the fleet communication system. "Destination, Kepler Nebula. Time to intercept, 17 hours." The stars stretched into lines as they entered hyperspace, that strange realm between normal space, where distance became meaningless. Lisa used the travel time to study everything they knew about Devourer technology and tactics. The ancient machines fought with mathematical precision, adapting to enemy strategies within minutes of encountering them. Their weapons could phase through normal matter, making conventional shields useless. Their coordination was perfect, like pieces of a single, vast mind working together. "How do you fight something that learns faster than you can change?" asked Vex, the Nexari cadet, who had volunteered despite his species' usual preference for careful planning. "You don't change," Jake answered from the pilot's seat. "You stay random from the beginning. Keep them guessing so they never get a chance to adapt, but randomness leads to mistakes," protested Kor, the Valorian warrior. "We could hit our own ships or waste ammunition on empty space." "Maybe," Lisa agreed. "But predictable tactics lead to certain death against these enemies. I'd rather take the chance of making mistakes than the certainty of being outsmarted." They spent the hyperspace journey planning their approach, but it was unlike any battle planning Lisa had ever studied. Instead of detailed strategies, they worked out general principles for staying unpredictable. Instead of coordinated formations, they practiced individual improvisation. "Remember," Lisa told the fleet as they prepared to drop out of hyperspace, "we're not trying to win this battle. We're trying to delay the enemy long enough for civilian evacuations. Every minute we buy saves lives." The Kepler Nebula appeared around them as they returned to normal space, its colorful gas clouds providing cover from long-range sensors. Lisa immediately ordered the fleet to spread out and begin scanning for the Devourer advance force. "Contact," Kestra announced from her sensor station. Multiple large signatures moving through the nebula. Configuration matches Devourer vessel profiles. The main screen lit up with tactical displays showing the enemy formation. 200 ships moved through space in perfect geometric patterns, their dark hulls absorbing light like holes in reality. They moved with the precision of a machine, which Lisa supposed they were. "All ships, this is Kane," she broadcast. "Remember the plan. No formation flying, no coordinated attacks, no predictable patterns. Make them work to figure out what we're doing." The Constitution moved deeper into the nebula, using the gas clouds for cover. Around them, the smaller Academy ships scattered in all directions, each captain free to engage the enemy however they thought best. The first contact came when a Devourer scout detected one of the Academy fighters. Lisa watched through the tactical display as the ancient machine opened fire with weapons that flickered in and out of normal space. The fighter pilot, a human named Gary Walsh, responded by flying in a spiral pattern that looked completely random dotted. Worked. The Devourer weapons, designed to track predictable flight paths, kept missing their target as Gary changed direction every few seconds without any apparent plan. "Interesting," Kestra observed. "The enemy targeting systems are having difficulty with truly random movement." More contacts followed as the Academy fleet engaged the Devourer advance force throughout the nebula. What resulted was unlike any space battle in recorded history. Instead of organized formations and coordinated attacks, it looked like chaos. Human pilots flew their ships like they were dancing, spinning through impossible maneuvers that had no tactical purpose except to be unpredictable. Kestra, flying a Zephyrian scout ship, combined her natural grace with human-style randomness to create a fighting style that seemed to drive the Devourer targeting systems completely crazy. Constitution, this is Fighter 7, came Gary's voice over the comm. I think I've figured something out. The enemy ships adapt to individual fighting styles, but they can't handle multiple random patterns happening at the same time. Lisa understood immediately. All ships, coordinate your chaos. Don't work together, but don't work alone either. Be random in groups. What followed was the strangest military order ever given. Ships began flying in loose clusters, each pilot doing something completely different while staying near their teammates. The combined effect was like watching a storm made of starships, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The Devourer ships, faced with multiple sources of unpredictability happening simultaneously, began making mistakes. Their perfect coordination faltered as their adaptive systems received contradictory data about enemy patterns that didn't actually exist. Enemy formation is breaking apart, reported Danny from the weapons station. They're losing cohesion. Lisa watched in amazement as the geometric perfection of the Devourer fleet dissolved into confusion. Ships that had moved like parts of a single organism now hesitated and second-guessed their responses. But the Academy fleet was taking heavy losses. 3 fighters had been destroyed, and the Constitution's shields were failing under concentrated fire from enemies that were still individually superior to anything humanity could build. Commander, Jake called from the pilot station. I'm reading massive energy signatures approaching our position. The main Devourer fleet is coming out of hyperspace. The tactical display exploded with new contacts as hundreds of ancient war machines appeared throughout the nebula. The advance force they had been fighting was nothing compared to this armada of sleeping giants awakening to defend territory that no longer belonged to anyone. All ships fall back to Rally Point 7, Lisa ordered. We've bought 12 hours for the evacuations. Time to see if we can buy more. As the Constitution turned away from the approaching enemy fleet, Lisa felt a mixture of pride and terror. They had proven that human tactics could work against impossible odds. But the real test was just beginning. The ancient machines were fully awakened now, and they were angry. Behind them, entire colonies waited for rescue ships that might not arrive in time. Ahead of them lay a battle that would determine whether humanity's first major contribution to galactic warfare would be victory or heroic sacrifice. Jake, Lisa said quietly as they maneuvered through the nebula. Whatever happens in the next few hours, I want you to know that saving Kestra was the most important thing any human has done since we reached the stars. Jake looked back at her with that steady gaze that had impressed so many instructors. I just did what felt right. I know, Lisa replied. That's what makes it important. Around them, the Academy fleet regrouped for the final phase of their desperate mission. They had learned that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about reaching out your hand even when everything told you to pull it back. The main Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Hundreds of ancient war machines spread across the Kepler Nebula in formations that hurt to look at directly. Their ships pulsed with energy that seemed to bend space. Around them, and their coordinated movements spoke of intelligence older than human civilization. Lisa Kane stood on the Constitution's bridge, watching the tactical display with a mixture of awe and terror. Each enemy vessel was larger than their entire fleet combined, and there were so many of them that the display couldn't show individual contacts anymore. It just showed a red wall of approaching death. "All Academy ships. Report status," she called. Over the communication system. "Fighter Squadron Alpha, 6 ships operational," came Gary Walsh's voice, steady despite the impossible odds they faced. "Scout Group Beta, 3 ships ready," reported Kestra from her Zephyrian vessel. "Training Cruiser Defiance, weapons charged and ready to fight," announced Captain Torres, one of the instructors who had volunteered to join the mission. Lisa counted their remaining forces. 9 small ships and the Constitution itself against. Hundreds of ancient superweapons. The mathematics were simple and hopeless. "Constitution, this is Admiral Cross," came a transmission from the Academy. "Long-range sensors show evacuation fleets are still loading civilians from the outer colonies. You need to buy us at least 2 more hours." 2 hours. Lisa looked at the approaching enemy armada and tried to imagine how they could possibly survive. "For 2 minutes, let alone 2 hours." "Understood, Admiral," she replied. "We'll give you what time we can." Jake Morrison turned from his pilot station, his face showing the same determination that had driven him to rescue Kestra weeks ago. "Commander, I have an idea. It's crazy, but it might work." "All our ideas are crazy," Lisa replied. "What do you have in mind?" "The enemy adapts to patterns, right? But what if we give them so many patterns that their systems overload trying to process them all?" Lisa understood immediately. "You want to split up and attack from every direction at once. Make them try to adapt to 10 different strategies simultaneously." "Not just attack," Jake said. "I want to make them think we're attacking when we're not. Think we're retreating when we're advancing. Think we're coordinated when we're completely random. Confuse their adaptive systems so badly that they can't function." It was insane. It was also the only chance they had. "All ships, this is Kane," Lisa broadcast. "New plan. We're going to split up and engage different parts of the enemy fleet using completely different tactics. Make them think they're fighting 10 different enemies with 10 different strategies." "That sounds like suicide," protested Captain Torres. "Everything we do today sounds like suicide," Lisa replied. "But this way we might confuse them long enough to matter." The Academy fleet scattered throughout the nebula like seeds thrown into the wind. Each group received orders to engage the enemy using a different approach, creating maximum confusion for the Devourer adaptive systems. Gary Walsh led his fighters in hit-and-run attacks, striking quickly and disappearing into the gas clouds before the enemy could respond. His tactics looked like classic guerrilla warfare, designed to make the Devourers think they faced a large force hiding in the nebula. Kestra took her scouts on a completely different approach, flying in perfect formation while targeting specific enemy systems with surgical precision. Her tactics mimicked advanced military doctrine, suggesting a highly organized opponent with superior training. Captain Torres used the Defiance like a flying fortress, trading shots with enemy capital ships in direct combat that looked like traditional fleet engagement. His approach suggested enemies who believed in overwhelming firepower and straightforward tactics. Meanwhile, Lisa took the Constitution on the strangest mission of all. Instead of attacking, she flew directly toward the largest Devourer ship, broadcasting continuous communications in dozens of different languages. To enemy sensors, it would look like an attempt at negotiation or surrender. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Their adaptive systems, designed to analyze and counter consistent enemy behavior, began receiving contradictory data from across the battlefield. Some Academy ships fought like primitives, others like advanced civilizations. Some sought battle, while others sought peace. "Enemy formation is breaking down," reported Danny Chun from his weapons station. "Their coordination is falling apart." Lisa watched through the view screen as the perfect geometry of the Devourer fleet dissolved into chaos. Ships that had moved, like parts of a single organism, now hesitated, changed course randomly, and sometimes fired on each other as their targeting systems received conflicting data. But the Academy was paying a terrible price for this confusion. The Defiance exploded under concentrated fire from 3 enemy dreadnoughts. 2 more fighters vanished in flashes of light as Devourer weapons found their targets. "Commander," Jake called from his station, "I'm reading power fluctuations in the enemy command ship. Their central coordination system might be overloading." Lisa saw the opportunity immediately. The largest Devourer vessel, clearly the coordinator for the entire fleet, was showing signs of system failure as it tried to process the chaotic battlefield data. "All remaining ships, concentrate on the command vessel," she ordered. "Everything we have right now." The surviving Academy ships converged on the enemy flagship like meteors falling toward a planet. Gary Walsh's fighters strafed the massive hull, while Kestra's scouts targeted specific weapon systems. The Constitution itself, weapons blazing, charged directly at the ancient superweapon. The Devourer command ship responded with firepower that should have vaporized the entire Academy fleet. But its targeting systems, overwhelmed by contradictory data, kept missing or firing at empty space, where ships should have been according to pattern analysis. "This is it," Jake announced, his hands steady on the controls as they flew directly toward the enemy vessel. "If we can take out their coordination, the whole fleet might shut down." But as they closed the distance, Lisa realized they weren't going to make it. The Constitution's shields were failing, her weapons were overheating, and the enemy ship's defenses were still formidable despite their confusion. That's when Jake Morrison made his choice. "Commander," he said quietly, "tell them back home that we reached out our hand." Before Lisa could stop him, Jake overrode the safety systems and began overloading the Constitution's reactor. The ship's power core, designed for training exercises, began building toward an explosion that would tear apart everything within a kilometer. "Jake, what are you doing?" Lisa shouted. "What humans do," he replied, echoing his words from that first rescue in the training chamber. "We reach out when someone falls." The Constitution struck the Devourer command ship just as its reactor exploded. The blast tore through both vessels, sending waves of electromagnetic energy throughout the enemy fleet. The coordinating signals that had held the ancient armada together for 10,000 years went silent. Lisa found herself floating in an escape pod, watching through a small porthole as the Devourer fleet died around her. Without their central coordination, the ancient machines simply stopped. They hung in space like abandoned toys, their purpose lost with their controlling intelligence. Other escape pods drifted nearby, carrying the survivors of the Academy fleet. Not many had made it out, but some had. Gary Walsh's voice came over the emergency comm channel, reporting survivors from his fighter squadron. Kestra's pod appeared on the scanner, her transmission confirming she had survived the final battle. "All pods, this is Admiral Cross," came a transmission from long range. "Rescue ships are en route. The evacuation fleets report successful withdrawal of all civilian populations. You bought us the time we needed." Lisa closed her eyes and felt tears mixing with the zero gravity around her. They had done it. Somehow, impossibly, they had stopped. An enemy that should have been unstoppable, but the cost had been terrible. Jake Morrison was gone, along with too many others who had volunteered for this mission. The Constitution was debris, and half their fleet had been destroyed. Why did he do it? Kestra's voice came over the comm, broken with emotion. Why did Jake sacrifice himself for people he barely knew? Lisa opened her eyes and looked out at the drifting Devourer hulks, ancient threats neutralized by human courage. "And stubbornness, because that's what humans do," she said. "We reach out our hand, even when it costs us everything." 6 months later, Lisa Kane stood before the Galactic Council as a full commander, wearing decorations that most officers never earned in entire careers. Behind her, a mixed crew of humans and other species waited to receive their own honors. Galaxy had changed. Human tactical doctrine was now studied at every military academy. The concept of controlled chaos had become standard training for all species. And most importantly, the mockery had stopped. "Commander Kane," said the council speaker, a dignified Nexari whose mathematical mind had finally grasped the value of human unpredictability. "Your species has proven that courage cannot be calculated, and that sometimes the illogical choice is the right choice." After the ceremony, Lisa found herself standing before a new memorial wall at the Academy. Jake Morrison's name was carved at the top, followed by all the others who had died in the Devourer War.